Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you today for this webinar on patriarchy and the backlash against climate action, and to talk about our work on climate governance here in Madagascar. My name is Liantou Rafanwan, and I'm the Environmental Project Officer at Transparency International Madagascar, the Malagasy chapter of the International Transparency International Movement. I'm also a member of the steering committee of Menengage Madagascar, and today my presentation is structured in three parts. First, I will state the context of climate change and gender in Madagascar. Second, I will share how the work alongside men already engaged in climate governance. And finally, I will reflect on the lesson learned and promising practices from our work in the field. I will give my presentation in English since my slides are in English and it's easier for me. But maybe during the Q&A, I will switch on French to make my explanation clearer. So, to begin, I want to share with you the context of climate change here in Madagascar. Um, As many of you may know, Madagascar is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. The country faces three major and recurring climate threats, cyclones, drought, and food insecurity. And these threats are not abstract, they are lived every season by a million of people. Just a few months ago, in February 2026, Cyclone Gazani, one of the most powerful, hit Madagascar in decades, struck Tuamasin, the country's second largest city, with winds. And we have like 59 people lost their lives. More than 90% of the city's buildings were damaged, and over 257,000 people were left displaced or in distress. And this was not isolated event. Gizani struck just 10 days after Cyclone Fitia had already devastated the northwest part of the island, affected more than 200,000 people, and destroyed nearly 20,000 homes to cyclone in 3 weeks. Um, what makes this situation critical is that climate shocks hit a very fragile system in Madagascar, um, where the country is among the most vulnerable countries, with around 1.3 million people affected by storms everywhere. This vulnerability is made worse by widespread poverty, limited infrastructure, a strong dependence on natural resources like agriculture, water, forest, and these resources are become more and more unpredictable and scarce. Um, When we talk about climate change in Madagascar, we need to understand that its impacts are not neutral, they are deeply gendered. Women are often the most affected in rural areas. They are responsible for managing social resources like water, food, food, and others, yet these resources are becoming increasingly scarce and unpredictable due to climate change. For example, more than 90% of households depend on rain-fed agriculture, which makes women particularly vulnerable to drought and cyclone. At the same time, despite these central roles, women remain largely excluded from decision-making space. According to the global estimate from the Women, women represent less than 30% of decision makers in climate-related processes, and the portion is often even lower at the local level in a country like Madagascar. Climate change doesn't just create new problems, it amplifies existing inequalities. Women have less access to land, to financial resources, and to information, which limits their ability to adapt. As a result, when climate shocks happen, they hit women harder, reinforcing cycles of vulnerability and inequality. So, addressing climate change ethically also means addressing gender inequality. They are inseparable. Now let's take a closer look at the work we are doing
Uh,
at TIE
uh,
Madagascar to engage men as ambassadors for women participation in
uh,
climate governance.
Sorry, is it possible to use the slideshow option for the presentation?
Uh, I can't hear.
Oh, I
Sorry.
was asking, is it possible to use the slideshow option for the presentation? It's a bit small. Some people were saying if you could use the slideshow option.
Because I have my notes
Okay.
near the presentation and yeah. But I can make it bigger. Is it okay for
Hmm.
you like that? Is it okay?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's a bit bigger and it's nice. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry for that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, maybe I can continue.
Yes, please. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, perfect. I can. So, um, recognize that local communities, women, and people with disability are still too often excluded from the design and implementation of climate projects, despite their height vulnerability and their essential role in the natural resources management. In 2024, TI Madagascar developed 7 key principles regarding the rate of local communities in the context of climate project implementation. This initiative was implemented as part of the Climate Governance Integrity Program, carried out in collaboration with the Transparency International Secretariat. These principles include the right to consultation, a free, prior, and informed consent, as well as community participation at all the stages of the projects, from design to evaluation, among other essential rights, and at ensuring an inclusive and equitable approach when implementation of climate project. To disseminate this principle among local community, we conduct a pilot project in the Tiana region, during which we selected VOAs or functional Nifoten in Malagasy or grassroots community organization. VOAs are local structure responsible for managing renewable natural resources, which the Malagasy government transferred to them through management contracts in accordance with this law and decree here in Madagascar. They play an essential role in environmental protection and at the local level. The objective of this initiative was to strengthen their role as community level intermediaries in order to facilitate the dissemination and adoption of the 7 principles regarding the rights of local communities in the implementation of climate projects. One of the 7 points in this guide, especially point 4, states that climate projects must incorporate a gender perspective to ensure that women in local communities are consulted and benefit equitably from climate initiatives. To disseminate these 7 points, a two-step process was implemented. First, an initial training session was organized for the selected VOEs. The goal was to provide them with an overview of the 7 points and encourage them to share them within their communities. A second training session was held a few months later, providing an opportunity to explore each point in greater depth. It was during this session, after the participant had already put the 7K points into practice in field, that the issues of women's participation come to the forefront. Through their own initiative, they were able to share feedback from the communities and discuss the importance of women's participation and voice in decision-making space. This discussion with them also highlight certain cultural norms that persist, particularly in the northern of Madagascar, where some community gatherings are traditionally reserved for men with castes such as Mivurialahe. The participants then discuss this practice and their impact, sharing their personal experience as well. Following this in-depth discussion, several of them pledged to no longer hold community meetings without women present, which is particularly important because most of these men hold influential positions within their communities. Following these trainings, we support these views in the field. One important observation was made. Women were present and actively speaking about their experience of climate change impact as sharing their views of climate-related projects. Following the final evaluation of the CGP project, the improved participation of women in community decision-making space was identified as one of the key outcomes of the project. Indeed, more presence is not enough to define participation. What we observed and what our evaluation confirmed was not passive attendance, but genuine agency and the ability to influence discussion and decision. Um, Although real changes have been observed and confirmed by our assessment, space for community dialogue remains largely male-dominated here in Madagascar. Even though the VOEs we have supported demonstrate a genuine desire for improvement, individual commitment is not enough to transform dynamics that are deeply entrenched in the system. It's also important to state clearly in Madagascar, climate and environmental space are still predominantly designed by and for men. The value, despite being at the heart of natural resources management, are largely composed of men. This is not merely a cultural issue, but the result of political and programmatic choices accumulated over the time. So, what does this mean for us? We can improve the quality of participation in existing space, encouraging women to speak up and be heard, but really transforming power dynamics. Who makes decisions, who holds the reins, requires longer and deeper and above all structural effort. Leaders' commitments are important. They mark progress, but without parallel changes to the system, they remain insufficient. This is not failure, it's clear aid assessment, and it is precisely this clarity that allows us to shut the next step. So, um, this is some lessons and promising practices that we can share with you from our work. Um, in our case, the entry point was the climate governance and the local community rights, the TEPCA fit. Men who are already in the climate movement have existing values like responsibility, protection, community survival, and connecting gender justice to those values creates internal motivation, not just like a compliance. We did not lecture. We asked question and listen. This worked because men start to recognize the problem themselves. Instead of feeling attacked, they begin to reflect and that they were not being criticized, they were understanding their own system. Our two-phase approach first equip the leader. The going back to deeper and collecting feedback was essential. The second session revealed that the first could not what happened when they went home. It created accountability without judgment. Leaders knew we were hurting not to evaluate them, but to learn with them. That changed the quality of what they were willing to share. Fourth, the feed accompaniment allows us to observe something no report could capture. Women speaking, it showed leaders that we trust their work enough to witness it, and it gave us the evidence later confirmed by our monitoring and evaluation that something didn't have shift. And when community leaders share experience with each other, something shifts. Commitment made in front of peers creates social wave that commitment made in front of facilitators do not. In a patriarchal context, male peer accountability is powerful lever. When a man commits in front of the other man, he respects the social cost of breaking that commitment increases. And last not least, here is some lessons that we can share with you. Community dialogue space remain made dominated. As we see, climate and environmental initiatives remain largely masculine by design in Madagascar. Engaging men is necessary but not sufficient. Individual transformation must be accompanied by institutional reforms like rules, procedures, and governance structures that make inclusion mandatory, not optional. Secondly, before we design anything, we have to understand where we are, not just geographically, but also culturally, historically, socially. Context is not the background to work, context is the work. And that means one thing above all else, we must listen before you train, we must understand before you act, Bef- because if you skip that step, if you arrive with your tools before understanding the terrain, you will design intervention that look like right on paper and misunderstood in practice. And last, one key lesson we learned is that we were not the right messenger, not because our message was wrong, but because we were not from the community. We did not share their daily, their reality. But as you see here, we leaders did. When they spoke about community rights, climate governance, or women participation, the message was stronger because it comes from someone they trust. In Madagascar, trust is both through shared experience and the local connection. So the lesson is simple. We must invest in local messenger, not just local audience. So I think this is the end of my presentation. If you have any question or comments, don't hesitate. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leon Silva, for your detailed presentation. At this point, we have some questions from the audience, and I'd like for you to answer the questions that have been already asked. Let me read the first two questions. One is from Vider, who is asking to elaborate a bit on what Mivoria lacei is, if I'm pronouncing right. And the other question is from Mark Langdon, who is asking about the patriarchal culture in Madagascar and how it is related to colonial legacies, and if so, is there any discussions about this influence, and can it support greater resistance to the dangerous impacts of global capitalism and trade? And in the meantime, I'd like to request all participants to drop questions, comments, or any thoughts you might have about uh, Liansoa's presentation. And in the meantime, I'm handing over to Liansoa back again to answer the two questions. Over to you, Liansoa.
So yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear you well because my connection is a little bit bad because it's afternoon here now. But I see the question here in the comments, and yeah. Um, Mivurialahe is a tradition in the northern Madagascar where they call only men to local meeting. So it's like saying all men come, we gonna have a meeting. So it's exclusive, it exclude women, and this is untraditional, unfortunately, at northern Madagascar. But as you see, it's begin to change now. We have more women when we make our local communities meetings. And the second question is the patriarchal culture in Madagascar related to colonials again? So if the discussion of the first candid. Yeah, I think maybe the patriarchal is related to colonial legacy, but I think it's Malagasy society is really patriarchal as it's born. I think, but because even if before colonials, it's already patriarchal. Even if we have some queen that lead the country and lead some region, but colonial have a real impact and give this culture to the Malagasy society. And yeah, this is the discussion we can have. Um, I don't know if we have already discussed and talk more and deeper about it, but yeah, I think it was a great subject to talk about how colonialism have influenced the Malagasy society, mainly when you talk about patriarchal and mainly when you talk about the woman missing in the decision place, and why woman voices is not in high level decision, and mainly when you talk about climate change and climate justice challenges. And I think it's the true question. Is it right or I miss one?
Yeah. Thank you, Liansoa, for the two questions. For now, we do not have extra questions, but yeah, we have participants introducing themselves. Kuram commented that he liked the focus on the working with community leaders and insistent that male-only spaces are not acceptable. And honestly, coming from Bangladesh and with YouthNet Global, we had a project that was called EcoMem project, and I do agree with you on on how you shared about the gendered realities on Madagascar. I feel that we are also having the same situations about the connection between different genders in Bangladesh. And yeah, definitely thank you for the sharing how the community participation guide was like implemented. From your presentation, I was really like, I have been really like fond of the quote that you included, where you said that men are that women there were not just participating or just like there as participants, but they were actually speaking and designing spaces. And coming from Bangladesh and working with YouthNet's project on Ecomen, I actually had the chance to like see, have like go through the similar concepts of like we had like fathers communions where we gathered fathers from different vulnerable communities. We had sessions on like how can women and men share the burdens of climate change and the disaster related impacts. Yeah, so I do think that I hear you, and it's really nice to talk about the issues related to gender and masculinity that we face across Bangladesh, face across Madagascar, and in the meantime, we are also going to have more presentations. So, audience, do we have any more questions? Oh, maybe not this time. So let's go to our next presenter, who is Kainga. And Kainga is actually uh, going to talk about his work in Uganda because he is working as a network coordinator for the Community Transformation Foundation Network. And as a frontline climate justice defender, he's going to also share about what it's like to work with masculinities and the concepts related to ecofeminism and patriarchy that we have been discussing today. So, Kainga, are you ready to share your presentation?
Hello. How are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. For me, I will not share presentation, but I just request for about 3 minutes to organize my laptop. I'm just going to share from my computer here on my experiences, on how I see the linkages to this topic of today, and then we can collectively have a discussion. Just allow me the 3 minutes, and I'm going to set up my computer, and I come back here. Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yes, Vider, I can definitely go ahead about the Ecomen project. Um, so the Ecomen project was aimed at empowering men and boys with environmental stewardship and climate justice related leadership, and of course, challenging the societal norms relating to masculinities and patriarchy. We worked with the Ecomen project for more than 1 year, and we actually reached many many underdeveloped and many marginalized communities. We have had many both male and both women and men participating, but also of course diverse gender identities. And it was mainly research because in Bangladesh we have often seen that women are the main burden holders of the climate crisis, and why, and that's when disasters occur, when the climate change impacts, women are the most sufferers, and they are the ones sharing those household responsibilities and other, and they are also vulnerable because of the patriarchy, because of the toxic masculinity there is, uh, because even whatever it is, but Bangladesh, we have the societal norm of a dominant masculinity that impacts women. So we decided, why not think in a different way? And that different way was to, why not bring those people, bring both of the shareholders, and start the discussion. And that's how we started on EcoMen. We bought men and boys, and we had discussions, we had leadership activities, and and then we had like these discussions with fathers, we had discussions with boys, and we engaged them with different environmental stewardship activities. And that's how we were able to reach many beneficiaries and many stakeholders. And then we also had a EcoMen Summit where we brought together experts and development practitioners and different stakeholders, and see how we can move forward with this idea and actually challenge the societal norms and empower women, and promote promote the idea of men being caring to the nature, caring to all the stakeholders we have in the society. So I think that's the basic overview, but yeah, there is more because it was a 1-year project. Kainga, are you ready in the meantime, or should we wait a bit more?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just requesting for only 2 minutes. I'm set to my computer now to start presenting. In 2 minutes.
Great, then maybe we can go back to Lian Soha and the questions that was asked before to continue that discussion.
So, Lian Sowa, we have actually got 2 questions for you. Maybe you can answer one and then one in the later question and answer discussions, which is from Esteban from Colombia, who wants you to elaborate more on the don't start with gender, start with men already committed idea. So, if you would like to go ahead, Lian Sowa. Briefly, and then we can go back to Kainga.
Yes, I see the question, and at the end of the project, we see we have more women. When the VOEs hold the local communities meetings, we have more women, and there are more. They only not here, but they're speaking, and we have already seen to some um commitment from this woman that are more actively when there is a local communities meetings, and yeah, I think that's all. I don't see another question. Is there another question? I think this is the one for me.
Yeah, thank you, Lian. So, yes, we had another question just now. It's like, in the end of the project, what will you see in reality? And there is another one, which maybe you already start, which is about like, don't start with gender, don't start with men already committed. I'm a bit confused about the question myself. Yeah.
But I also saw Kainga give a thumbs up. I think Kainga's ready now, so maybe.
Yeah, then maybe we can go back to the question later, Lian. So, let's go with Kainga and hear from him.
Now, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I think I want to first introduce myself and this topic that I chose to participate. Patriarchy and the backlash to climate justice. My perspectives and experience on the same. I'm called Kayinga Mudristo. I'm a Ugandan human rights defender. I'm a social entrepreneur and the network coordinator of Community Transformation Foundation Network, COTFON. My work sits at the intersection of environmental protection and social justice, specifically addressing how patriarchal structures and the political backlash hinders climate justice in East Africa. This is my biography and the data and the career. I have over 20 years experience in community development and policy advocacy. My role and advocacy as the coordinator for COTFON in the Greater Masaka, that is the central region of Uganda. I'm focused on land rights, youth unemployment, and the environmental impacts of oil and gas. Notable recognitions include I was nominated for the 2022 European Union Human Rights Defenders Award for my efforts in amplifying the voices of communities affected by the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, EACOP. And global engagement, I serve as the African Civil Society Observer to the UNFCCC Loss and Damage Fund, representing vulnerable communities and groups such as women and children who are disappropriately affected by climate disasters. So now back to climate justice and patriarchy. My work through Men Engage Uganda and COTFON explores how patriarchal masculinities contribute to ecological harm. The first focus is on dismantling harmful norms. I personally advocate for involving men and boys in shifting patriarchal roles, arguing that they too are the beneficiaries of a society that values care of environmental exploitation. This is my focus on intersectional approach. I usually highlight the gender inequality which exacerbates climate vulnerability, noting women in Uganda often face increased risks of gender-based violence and poverty following climate shocks. In regard to backlash and persecution, because of my opposition to fossil fuel projects like the East African crude oil pipeline, I have faced significant professional and personal backlash. First, physical threats. In the year 2022, my offices and home were raided by armed individuals, and I have been receiving numerous phone threats from security organs and forces. Criminalization of activism. My work is part of a broader struggle in Uganda where environmental defenders frequently face arrests and convictions for protesting against the infrastructure projects they deem disastrous to the climate. Lastly, is disinformation campaigns. I participate in global dialogues addressing how organized resistance, including misjourney and climate denial, is used to undermine activists fighting for a just transition. I thank you, and that's what I prepared for this discussion with you. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Kainga, for your discussion. At this point, I would so we have like two presenters. One, we have Kainga, and then we also have Lian Sowa. I wanted to ask if you both have any comments or any suggestions or any questions about each other's presentations or discussions that you've made. Yeah. Mm. Lian Sowa or Kainga, I'm asking if you would like to make a comment or a suggestion or a question about each other's presentation made. Mm, okay, then I would go ahead uh, and open the floor for the audience to ask any questions, any comments, or any further suggestions, just anything that you have to share about our presenters or speakers' inputs in our overall session. The floor is open for questions. Yeah, I'd like to request Kurum's support in collecting the questions.
Yes, for sure. And just to say again, thank you both, like all three of you, for the wonderful connections you're making between how patriarchy as a dominant mindset of extraction and exclusion of women and gender diverse people really sidelines and is a mirror to the climate crisis, like, and how we see this happening in many ways. I just like to remind the audience as well that because we are a small group, please do feel free to unmute yourself and directly ask any questions that you might have. And I think I'll go back to the question that was asked by about how what does it mean to don't start with gender but start with men already committed. And we maybe hear back a bit more about from Liansoa about this, but just to maybe share how I understood that question and how I see it happening in different contexts by attending these various webinars where I listen to practitioners and people on the ground, like all of you, is that when you go and talk to a group of men who don't necessarily consider women's or gender diverse participation important, if you go and say to them, okay, we need to hear the perspective and the voices of women or other gender diverse individuals as well in these spaces, and how their perspectives and their priorities of what needs to be done, they're not really receptive to that. That is not important to them. That doesn't connect with them mostly. And so instead of saying that, okay, we need, because we want to have a more gender balanced approach. So why we need to include women or gender diverse people. What really seems to work more is that if you start by talking about, okay, you say that as a man, you are committed to the caring for the environment, to caring for other people, right? And care work is very important and inherent to all of us. So in this context, we can start by talking about the distribution of the care work itself, right? And using that as a starting entry point, then we can go and say, okay, uh, but who is doing this care work? It's mostly women, right? So you need to go and ask them, how are you doing this? How can we do this together? How can we build better together? But yes, please, Liansoa, do build on and answer this question as well more.
Merci beaucoup. Peut-être que je vais parler en français pour me faire mieux comprendre. Effectivement, c'est ce qu'on a fait, c'est-à-dire qu'on a invoqué les 7 points et on leur a juste donné les 7 points, on leur a expliqué c'était quoi. Ils sont partis une fois sur terrain, une fois, après quelques mois, on a organisé une autre réunion avec ces leaders communautaires où on a vraiment récolté leur feedback, comment ça s'est passé sur terrain. Et c'est vraiment quelque chose qui est sorti par leur initiative. Sur les points que vous nous avez partagés, le point numéro 4 nous a vraiment intéressés. Et c'est là que les discussions ont commencé. Pourquoi c'est important par eux-mêmes? C'est pas nous qui avons initié les discussions, c'est eux-mêmes qui se sont rendus compte. Pourquoi on parle d'équité de genre? Pourquoi on parle du fait que c'est important d'inclure les femmes lorsqu'on parle d'initiatives climatiques, lorsqu'on met en œuvre des projets climatiques? Ce sont eux-mêmes qui ont sorti ces initiatives et c'est là que les discussions ont été initiées par ces mêmes leaders entre eux-mêmes où ils ont discuté du fait que, ah oui, c'est vrai, nous, traditionnellement, on a la culture du fait qu'on se dit, ah, venez les hommes, allons nous réunir, c'est le Mivuriala, et les hommes, venez, on va se réunir. Et par leur propre discussion, ils se sont rendus compte que c'était ces traditions-là, c'était ces cultures-là qui perpétuaient en fait, au final, l'exclusion des femmes dans les cercles de discussion. Là, on parle juste des réunions. Est-ce qu'elles ne sont pas présentes lors des réunions ou lorsqu'elles sont présentes, elles ne parlent pas forcément parce qu'il y a quand même du fait que c'est aux hommes de parler. Et on a vraiment vu ce shift du fait que les femmes ont commencé à être nombreuses dans les réunions communautaires. Euh, Elles ont commencé à prendre la parole et j'ai une petite anecdote du fait qu'on a organisé une réunion communautaire. C'était peut-être en mai 2025 où vraiment ces leaders communautaires tellement leur discussion a été enrichie, ils se sont partagés des expériences et ils se sont convaincus entre eux-mêmes. Et, on a organisé une réunion communautaire en commun. Ils se sont vraiment dit, aller appeler toutes les femmes du village. On a dû attendre pour que les femmes du village puissent venir pour la réunion communautaire. Il y en a même qui ont insisté, il faut aussi que les enfants participent parce qu'on parle de l'environnement. C'est aussi question des futures générations. On- et un directeur d'école a même ramené toutes ses classes pour assister à la réunion communautaire. Et encore une fois, durant la réunion communautaire, la question était basique. Pourquoi on parle de changement climatique? Pourquoi c'est important de parler? Pourquoi notre voix en tant que femme, en tant que jeune, surtout les jeunes aussi, il faut pas les oublier parce que on a cette société patriarcale, mais on a aussi cette société où l'aîné est plus respecté, l'aîné doit prendre parole, mais on a vu aussi une meilleure participation des jeunes. On s'est demandé pourquoi il faut que les jeunes parlent, surtout lorsqu'on parle de changement climatique. Et c'était vraiment la question, c'était vraiment le shift qu'on a pu voir. Mais comme j'ai dit lors de ma présentation tout à l'heure, même si individuellement, ces leaders communautaires étaient convaincus de l'importance de la participation des femmes lorsqu'on parle de changement climatique, il y a quand même, par exemple, ces projets climatiques qui viennent s'implémenter dans leur communauté, qui ne prennent pas des initiatives spécifiques pour inclure les femmes. Ils n'incluent même pas les communautés locales, donc forcément les femmes, elles sont plus négligées ou on n'entend même pas leur foyer. Il y a quand même ce besoin de changement structurel, de changement de manière de faire, surtout pour les personnes d'extérieur de la communauté qui doivent promouvoir le fait d'inclure les femmes dans les espaces de décision. Et voilà. J'espère que j'ai pu apporter quelque chose à ce que Kurama a déjà dit tout à l'heure.
Thank you, Lian Showa, for answering the questions in detail and explaining how it matters. So we have a hand raised from Mark Langton. So, Mark, requesting you to unmute and go ahead with the question.
Thank you so much. Been such an interesting conversation. Brilliant presentations. I shared in the chat the UNESCO new vision for the global education. And my question relates to the extent to which anti-patriarchal and kind of gender equality is being supported within, the broader education systems within Bangladesh, within Madagascar, within Uganda, and whether we are seeing shifts like that, or whether through development of what we call here learning for sustainability, or environmental education, this creates an opportunity for both agendas, both perspectives to be brought forward together because they need to support each other. So I'd be very interested to know whether mainstream education is able to support these kind of transformational discussions and projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So I think this question was meant for like all of us. So I'd go first and then share about the Bangladesh perspective a bit. So the perspective is that the current mainstream education, the curriculum scenario in Bangladesh is that it's constantly changing depending on which political government is there, and and it's actually concerning, because when we had an autocratic regime, the curriculum was like that. Then we had the interim government, and then the curriculum was like one. And then now we are supposed to have a new curriculum change. So with every So with every government, our curriculum is changing, and that is actually creating problems because at this moment in Bangladesh, we are also seeing radical politics rising. We are seeing um, many many contradictory beliefs to what climate justice, what gender justice expects. And that creates uncertainties because uncertainties among the public, uncertainties among the student, and the overall curriculum is just becoming more unpredictable, and it's sometimes it's not being updated enough. So we have such challenges that political ideologies of different political groups are actually reflecting on the curriculum itself. So sometimes it's like how much the government actually supports women or supports gender justice is actually reflected on the curriculum, if to be direct. And yes, so it can be frustrated. And overall, the curriculum, I would say, it's not very positive about the gender justice related ideas. If I have to say, I was a climate activist all throughout my high school. I started in grade 7. I just finished high school lastly, and I'm on a gap year. So I have been studying this curriculum and fighting for environment and climate justice all along. And what I have realized is is that and what I have realized from is that we still do not use even the correct wording for different genders. Even the words are problematic in the books. And when I was in ninth grade, my school told me you have to study a subject called home economics just because you are a girl. I was not allowed to study political science in my school, and I was forced to take the subject. And then I appealed to the education board that please allow me to start study political studies and civics and citizenship instead of home economics, which taught me how to cook in the proper way and how to clean the house, which color of curtains should I choose from my home based on my home type. So yeah, so that's how sometimes the education is like. It is pushing gender narratives, and when I was in fourth grade, my class, it was like that boys were actually asked to take agriculture studies, and we had to take a class on sewing clothes, and they had to take a class on planting trees. But why can't we plant the trees and they can sew the clothes? So that kind of narratives is being pushed as being part of the education curriculum. And of course, it's changing everywhere. No matter knows what happens next year in the new curriculum. So over to Kainga or Lian, sorry for the mispronunciation. Lian Soa, for your insights on how the patriarchal narratives are dominating school curriculums. Who wants to go first?
Oui, peut-être que je vais répondre à un peu ça. Peut-être c'est la même situation ici à Madagascar, euh, où peut-être on parle pas vraiment des qualités de genre et tout ça dans les curriculums scolaires. Mais en tout cas, je vois quand même une évolution ici à Madagascar car tous les ONG internationales et tous les associations commencent à beaucoup transmettre ces idées-là. Euh, Surtout les jeunes, surtout les associations de jeunes. Et comme ici à Madagascar, par exemple, c'est des associations de jeunes qui portent ces voix-là à l'international. C'est vraiment incroyable de voir ces jeunes-là porter ces voix de l'importance de la voix de la femme dans les décisions climatiques, par exemple. Ces initiatives-là sont surtout portées par les jeunes et je trouve ça excellent d'avoir ça. Cependant, au niveau du gouvernement, ils sont un peu forcés parce qu'il y a tous les bailleurs de fonds, toutes les organisations internationales qui financent à peu près tout ce qui est éducation, tout ce qui est santé. Ils sont à peu près obligés de suivre ce pas et d'avoir cette évolution lorsqu'on parle d'égalité de genre, lorsqu'on parle de la promotion de la masculinité positive, lorsqu'on parle de santé sexuelle et reproductive. Mais je vois que même si ces efforts sont surtout poussés de l'extérieur, mais on ne voit pas vraiment des réels efforts de la part du gouvernement ou à l'école publique. Je pense pas qu'on puisse, que ce soit vraiment un sujet important à discuter à l'école. Mais je trouve quand même qu'il y a ces airs nouveaux portés par les jeunes, les organisations, les associations qui permettent d'avoir de tels sujets au niveau scolaire. Et par exemple, je trouve une belle initiative. Il y a un projet, une sorte d'activité nommée Mon métier de demain, où on donne parole aux femmes qui ont des métiers, on va dire, exceptionnels, pas faits selon société, pas faits pour les femmes, et où ils discutent ce qu'elles font. Par exemple, on a des ingénieurs informatiques. Ce sont des métiers qui, de base, ne sont pas destinés aux femmes. Et là, on voit qu'elles mènent leur voix dans les écoles publiques et elles parlent de leur métier, ce qui ouvre la possibilité aux jeunes et aux enfants d'avoir cette perspective que en tant que jeune femme, je peux aller si loin comme elle. Je ne sais pas si ça peut répondre à ta question.
Yeah, thank you, Lian Soa. Kainga, would you like to share anything about from your perspective?
Okay, thank you. Um, thank you so much for this. I'm happy to. There is a question. Do you mean the question that has been posted by Mr. Vida to share my reaction to that?
Yes, you can answer both. Maybe you can go first with what Lian So was discussing about the connection between patriarchy and climate education or the education curriculum in your country, and then go ahead with Vider's question.
I beg your pardon. The relationship between what?
I mean, the question asked by Mark, which was about how patriarchy and men and boys engagement is portrayed in your education curriculum, in Uganda's education curriculum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for this. This is how I think I need to respond to this. How I see this in Uganda. Patriarchy influences the education curriculum in Uganda by reinforcing gender stereotypes, where cultural norms often prioritizes boys' education and shape learning to favor female-dominated roles, despite government policies promoting gender equality in Uganda. The curriculum, along with teacher attitudes and hidden pedagogical practices in Uganda, frequently perpetuates traditional gender roles and limits girls' aspirations and opportunities. One point here I want to emphasize is the reinforcement of gender roles. Many schools here in Uganda still reflect patriarchal attitudes in classroom, where curriculum delivery can influence the belief that certain fields like science and technical subjects are male domains. Then when we talk about hidden curriculum, beyond the formal curriculum, a hidden curriculum exists where teacher expectations and school routines can perpetuate gendered behavior, leading to low confidence or different career aspirations for girls. So when you look at this relationship of patriarchy and climate justice, I think it is something that, for example, patriarchy, climate change, and education in Uganda are interconnected, forming a cycle where climate shocks disproportionately affects girls' schooling due to deeply ingrained gender roles. As climate-induced crop failures reduce household incomes, families prioritize boys' education, forcing girls into domestic labor or early marriage, which is very catastrophic. While the policy exists, the curriculum often fails to address this intersection with hidden gender biases in materials and a low female representation in climate-relevant studies, limiting girls' role in adaptation and reducing longer-term economic resilience. If I share more on the impact on girls' education, that is the patriarchy and the climate, we look at economic vulnerability. In Uganda, drought and floods, particularly in rural areas like where I'm living in the southwestern Uganda, it destroys crops, limiting the money households have for school fees, and due to patriarchal norms, parents often pull girls out of schools first to work or marry to reduce expenses and secure resources, a trend highlighting that climate change is not gender neutral. Then there is increased domestic work. Climate impacts, such as reduced water availability, force girls to spend more time fetching water and firewood, causing high absenteeism in school and low completion rates, with only 53% of girls aged 6 to 12 years in Uganda completing primary education. Then we'll look at infrastructure disruptions. Damaged infrastructures like schools, roads, from extreme weather makes it difficult for girls to travel, often leading to school closures and school dropout. Then lastly, education curriculum and gender, they are hidden biases. Textbooks and educational materials in Uganda often feature limited representation of women, reinforcing a gender division of labor, which reduces girls' confidence and ambitions. We have also STEM disparities. Despite a science policy we are having in Uganda, which is promoting STEM for all, few girls choose science path compared to boys, which inhibits their participation in building climate resilient technologies. Then we also see missing climate education, a gap in a robust, context-specific, and gender-responsive climate education in the curriculum, which prevents girls from gaining knowledge about adaptation strategies, reducing their capacity as future environmental leaders, which we find that it is very, very critical. These are the key mitigation needs that we see on the ground in Uganda. Gender-responsive curriculum, introducing school material that challenges stereotypes and emphasizes girls' leadership in environmental management. 2, supportive infrastructure. We are looking at investing in flood-proof schools and ensuring girls have access to safe sanitation to keep them in school during climate shocks. Lastly is about economic empowerment. We are having programs for providing cash transfers to families, conditions on girls remaining in school, to counter the impacts of climate-induced poverty. So allow me also respond to the question and submission from Mr. Vida regarding my presentation. Mr. Vida, I'm very thankful for those moving words. I know if you look at your question, I don't know whether everyone has seen it very well or I need to read it again. Did everyone see Mr. Vida's question? Because Mr. Vida was asking me, of course, it was heartbreaking to hear me speak about the threats and the violence, including arrests for me and other climate justice activists. He wanted me to share more about what keeps me going. How do I dare to continue? And what gives me deep motivation? This is my brief response to that, Mr. Vida. It is true that the journey for climate justice in Uganda is fraught with immense danger, including arrests, harassment, and intimidation are constant threats for activists like me who are opposing projects like the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, which is going to traverse two countries from Uganda to Tanzania. However, the question of how I dare to continue is often answered by the very crises we are fighting. Here is what gives me and my fellow activists the deep motivation to carry on. One, the voices of the vulnerable. We are speaking up for communities, especially in rural areas, who are facing severe hunger and food security, and whose voices are not being listened to. We cannot stay silent while the climate crisis destroys livelihoods and lives. Two, a future for our children. I'm a father, I'm a parent. We are speaking up for, I refuse to pass down an unlivable plan. My work and that of others could make the difference between a sustainable future and a catastrophic one for the next generation is a profound motivator for me. Lastly, is the power of collective action. Seeing other courageous younger people across Uganda and the world joining the movement gives me hope. We are persistent and united, and we know that no voice is too small to make a difference. Solidarity in our struggle. Our strength comes from our togetherness, marching together, sharing stories, and supporting one another after being released from detention. Also, I see love for our land, the deep desire to protect the beauty of our home, like the ecosystems of Lake Victoria, which is a service to over 40 million people, and the forests that are currently under threat fuels our tenacity. Despite the enemies of the state labeling, because we are labeled anti-state, anti-development, we are driven by the firm belief that another world is possible and that we must do everything in our power to secure it. I thank you very much for listening to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Kainga. I feel really motivated from your words. Yeah, we should definitely support each other in each other's fights. And as a climate activist, I also share the same sentiment. So now, Lian Soa, before we wrap up, we are almost at the end. Would you like to share any final thoughts or comments briefly?
Oui, effectivement. Tout d'abord, je souhaiterais féliciter Keinga pour son travail et son dévouement pour la protection de l'environnement et tout ce qu'il fait sur l'éducation aussi. C'est vraiment incroyable de voir cela et c'est vraiment incroyable et honorable de voir tout votre travail. Et oui, c'est vrai, je partage cette idée de nous supporter aussi. Et si on a aussi l'occasion de nous supporter, surtout aussi à l'échelle internationale pour pouvoir peser nos voix, ce serait vraiment ce serait vraiment intéressant de pouvoir supporter dans nos plaidoyers, tout ça. Et j'ai vu une question de Couram que je comprends pas réellement. Est-ce que tu peux expliquer parce que j'allais répondre à la question aussi en profitant de ma conclusion, s'il te plaît? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you.
I don't understand your question. I want to to answer it for the conclusion, but
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is there someone another organization in Madagascar that you want the audience to know, hey, this is doing great work, go and look them up, support them, learn about them, or any individual?
maybe I want to present a little bit about the Transparency International Madagascar. And our work is more focused on fighting corruption, and we work on different sectors like environment, but we work also on sexual corruption, which happens a lot when you talk about education. And we have a lot of work around it with government, where we want to create a safe place for victims to report what happened to them when we talk about sexual corruption, mainly when it happened in high school and university. Yeah, we you can see our work in our website www.transparency.mg. And as the yeah, I think. And one of the organization here in Madagascar, we have also um, a gender and the climate justice coalition, which is led by People Power Inclusion or PPE. With this coalition, we are working on all sector linked to climate justice, and we work on health, education, finance, climate, and others. And the organization led PPE and with the ICA Coalition, which is a youth organization focused on the free conversion of Rio, CBD, uh, uh, the one of climate change and the one of desertification. They are produced the gender and the climate report on Madagascar, and that's something that I already shared with the climate justice group. But I think it's a great word if you want to know more about the gender and the climate justice challenge happens here in Madagascar. Yeah, I think that's all. And don't hesitate to follow our page. And yeah, we are also on Facebook and we are already active there. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.